So hello, and welcome to another Legends of Runeterra video. My name is Chris, and today, for the third time, we are back, and this time we are talking about decks for you to play in the upcoming expansion. Now, we got 8 decks, as you can see, number 8 here. We got 8 decks to talk about. We'll talk about them briefly. Some are more serious, some are more memes, some are, in between. Let's talk about them and see where we end up. And we'll start with number 1, which is a card that was revealed on the first ever day and you might have forgotten about completely, and that is Minion. Now, Minion is a 2-mana card that says, last breath, create a copy of me in hand at round end. So obviously anytime it dies, you'll get one in hand. It's kind of a recurring card, right? Quite a cool idea, I thought, for a card. And what you can do with Minion is quite interesting, because when you combine it with Iceborne Legacy, if you can get this off onto Minion, that will of course means that all your minions are 4/3s. And when all of your minions are 4/3s and you have a 2-mana 4/3 that you just have endless value from, that you'll just keep getting back, that can be quite scary for your opponent, particularly then once you start combining it with things like Pack Mentality, or if you use a Fading Memories, that of course when that ephemeral version of it dies, it will give you another one in hand. And from there you can just, build your board full of these units that are always expendable, always there for you, and that's kind of the idea. And then you use Pack Mentality to give them all Overwhelm and hit them in the face. Now, that's obviously the ideal, so how do we prepare for, that hasn't quite worked? Well, Iceborne Legacy, not Pack Mentality, has mostly been used before with spiders, as in the spiderlings that you get from Elise, that you get from things like Vile Feast or Brood Awakening, because of course if you use Iceborne Legacy on them, you have all these ways of summoning, again, pretty strong units to, again, kind of do exactly the same thing with Pack Mentality at the end. And that's kind of all this deck is, there isn't too much else to say about it, really. That's kind of what this deck is there for and what it's trying to do. Should be a very funny deck to take into, probably not ranked queue, but normal queue, and have some fun with. I'm sure that you'll catch some people off guard and have a blast playing this deck. So we've gone from the, meme side to perhaps the most serious deck here, and perhaps a real threat to the game. And what is this deck? Bandle Swarm. This is a deck that I expect will be very, very competitive. At least something like it. A couple cards will change, as they will for all cards, old decks, I should say. You'll definitely be like, I would have put this in there instead of that, and it's very likely you might be correct. Of course, before we play these cards, you'll never truly know which one is meant to be best. People will always overrate or underrate cards, and it'll take some time for, true decks to settle down into what they are. But something like this, this kind of idea, obviously using the card that everyone went crazy over, the Yordle Explorer, as well as Yordle Captain, and kind of the idea of just having, constant cards through Hidden Pathways, Pokestick. And basically I've just paired it with Rally and Sharpsight, because those are just good options that kind of fill the holes in the deck. Your units are going to get really big. That's kind of the idea. Between Yordle Explorer, Yordle Captain, and Poppy, the idea is that you grow your units. I know Poppy got nerfed. That shouldn't impact this deck that much at all, because if you look at every card other than Yordle Captain, I believe, has 3 or less attack. So, that nerf to Poppy, as I was explaining in the video about that nerf, shouldn't really make that much of a difference in this deck at all, really. Poppy will still be buffing pretty much every single unit you play, and will definitely be a pretty big threat for your opponent. And obviously between Yordle Explorer, between Bandle Swarm Mare, Poppy, Yordle Captain, you have so many options. I mean, even if you don't get Bandle Swarm Mare, if you just go Yordle Explorer into Ziggs, you have a 3-mana 4/5 with a good ability. Your opponent is in real trouble from that moment on, because it's probably not until turn 5 that they'll be able to trade with Ziggs, and you might have already gotten like 2 attacks off with Ziggs and be able to get the 3rd one off as well. Like, your opponent is in real trouble, just in general. And that's what this deck essentially does, and we've seen it before. And kind of, if you think back to when Bandle Swarm first came out, this kind of deck was kind of the first one. This was kind of the first iterations of these deck, was kind of similar to this, but without Yordle Explorer and without Yordle Captain, where they just created a bunch of cards and just kept swarming the board more and more and more. And I think it'll be a really good deck. Just, a high tier 1 deck, something like this will be. And you've got the, rallies effects as well to just end the game for your opponent. Going from perhaps the troubling to a deck that I really love the idea of, and this is Kennen Ezreal, and I had to have a complete rethink on this deck, because initially I was on this idea, and then I changed when I saw that Ionian landmark. I was like, well, that Ionian landmark levels up Kennen straight away, and so then I moved to Ionia, and then after sort of looking at the deck again, I kind of thought, no, I'm going back to this, because I like this idea more, because I think it has just more potential, I would say. And the idea here is that Kennen will give you Mark of the Storms, and Mark of the Storms is 0 mana fleeting cards that target an enemy unit, and that will obviously level up Ezreal for you. And the idea is Kennen, once leveled, particularly Kennen, will level up Ezreal very quickly on his own, completely on his own. And this, as you can see, is a Shellfolk deck. Now, why is that? Well, essentially, Kennen, of course, you might wonder, well, how are you going to level up Kennen? You've summoned the same ally 5+ times this game. Well, we're going to use Octopus as our main way of trying to level Kennen, because of course we don't just have Octopus, we also have Trinket Trade that can guarantee us another Octopus. And the great thing about Octopus and resummoning Octopus is because it has a tune and because it has a summon ability, we aren't just constantly losing that mana because we're recalling a unit. That is often a big problem with a lot of, the kind of recall strategies in the past, is that you just lose tempo, you lose mana. But with Octopus, because it has a tune and it's only 1 mana, we aren't losing that tempo. And we have the potential to generate a ton of pranks in hand doing this as well. And we can recall it with something like Quicken or Lightning Rush as well. We can recall Octopus and just have it back in our hand and be, quite thankful that that is the case. And then just replay it and level up Kennen that way. And I think that's a really cool idea. And, once Kennen's leveled up, as I say, he will hopefully be leveling up Ezreal really, really fast with those Mark of the Storms. And, with combining of Lecturing Yordle and Conchologist. And then once we have a bunch of pranks with Shellfolk, we could just be in the clear anyway at that point. And we'll just obviously generate a ton of value with Shellfolk. And then from there, just kill them with Ezreal. We've all died to Shellfolk. We understand how it works at this point. And yeah, this is the deck. I think it'll be really cool to play. A lot of fun. And, Kennen's an interesting card because he kind of is flexible, but I'm not exactly sure where he maybe fits best. And maybe this will end up being it, but who knows. This is a deck I'm very excited to play, though. Next up, we have Pantheon Taric. And this is kind of the more kind of all-in, like, build a big Pantheon kind of idea. Pantheon is another very flexible champion, right? You can play him with Noxus, you can play him with Demacia, you can play him with Shurima. All very good options in my opinion, all potentially very viable. I'm not claiming to know which one is best, but I wanted to build a Taric deck because it's been a while for Taric, and I also think, as I mentioned before in a previous video, the change to Relentless Pursuit, the fact that it grants an ally +1/+1, also means that Taric will now do the thing that he used to do with Golden Aegis, where you get the extra rally as well. And that can be, very, very good for you. And that might help quite a lot. And so I wanted to build a Taric deck. So this is it. The idea is pretty straightforward. It's like a lot of other Taric decks. We have this Wounded White Flame card that Fury and Fated are two keywords that should synergize very well together. Obviously, I haven't seen them in action, so I'm not quite sure. But I imagine that, those two keywords seem pretty good. Like your opponent either has to block something that is just going to grow hopefully pretty quick, or they're just going to have to get smacked in the face by it, which is also good. And I also have one Dragon's Clutch in here as well, because I was a bit like, oh well, we might need a bit of more card draw. That is one of Demacia's weaknesses, so adding a Dragon's Clutch will guarantee us, we do have 2 dragons in the deck, and maybe if this Wounded White Flame can grow, or the Screeching Dragon can grow, we could even go for a sneaky Overwhelm win as well, which could be nice later down the line. And so yeah, it's a pretty standard deck. I think if you were going to create this, it's pretty normal, I would say, but I think it could be pretty good as well. Going away from that kind of idea and going more for an all-in Pantheon, which might be more the Taric way, this is more of a less going all-in on Pantheon and just kind of saying Pantheon has the keyword Overwhelm on him, so let's use that, because this is an Overwhelm deck with the idea of just simply, you have units that say Overwhelm on them, or you can give them Overwhelm with stuff like Riven, and you have plenty of Overwhelm units, or Kato can give them Overwhelm after they grow, and that's kind of just the idea. That's the basic principle of this deck, just to give things Overwhelm, buff them up to make them pretty big, go from there. Maybe Pantheon will level up as well, and at that point you can just kind of win through his extra keywords, hopefully, if that becomes the case. But yeah, just a pretty simple deck. We've also gone for one Darius because he's a potentially very good finisher to a game, and if your opponent is on less than 10 health, which they might be, he's a big threat. And so yeah, Whirling Death I think goes really well with this kind of thing. particularly with something like Wounded White Flame. Like, if you think Whirling Death with this card is just insane, right? You get the buff from the target, but then you can also potentially kill 2 units, which will then give them an extra 2 buffs. You know, if you're blocking a unit, you'll kill the unit that you've potentially blocked, and you'll kill, you know, a unit potentially to the side as well. Like, that's +3/+3 potentially, depending on what you're blocking. Like, that's a lot from one card, right? So I think that, you know, I love that combo with Whirling Death and Wounded White Flame. I think that that could be really quite strong. And this deck, yeah. And again, another deck that I'm really kind of looking forward to playing and having some fun with. Next up, we have Rumble Riven. And Rumble was the champion of all of the new champions that I think is the hardest to build around. Because I'm not quite sure that Rumble, obviously his intended synergy, I would imagine, was with Sion. But I'm not actually sure that they go together all that well. I actually think your Draven is probably just going to stick in that deck because you need the extra things to discard. Draven just fits with it better, I think, overall. And so trying to find somewhere for Rumble to play is quite interesting. But I have gone with Riven. 1, I just like Riven. 2, giving Rumble the Blade and giving him Overwhelm could be very scary indeed, particularly if he has Spell Shield, right? So that could be very scary for someone trying to deal with Rumble. And so we have kind of this hybrid mix of some Rumble cards, like the Manifesting Mecha Yordles here, and some of the, you know, kind of discard cards that came with Sion, like Fallen Rider and Lost Soul. We also have Kato as well, you know, again, just giving Rumble like 8 attack and Overwhelm. You know, if you're attacking on turn 5 and you play Rumble into Kato, that's a pretty strong attack, and your opponent is going to be, you know, struggling with that probably quite a bit. And so, yeah, again, just another deck that I think Rumble I struggled with. Rumble is a hard champion to build around because you have to find, you know, do you want to go all in on Rumble, or do you just kind of want to play him for the value of being a 4-mana 5/4 potentially with Impact and Quick Attack? You know, it's kind of a mix, and it's kind of an interesting idea just in general. And obviously you could go Piltover and Zorn. Do you play him as a Noxian champion? Do you play him as a Bandle Swarm champion? Like, there's a lot going on with Rumble. I think he's really interesting. And it'll be interesting to see where the best deck is, because I have absolutely no idea. But this, I think, is a nice attempt. Now, for this next deck, it's built around a card that you can't main deck, so I need to just show it to you. We're building a Little Dipper deck, so keep this card always on your mind. It's a 6-mana 5/3. It's one of the Mecha Yordles. To play me, discard a unit. Last breath, summon an exact copy of the discarded unit. Keep this unit in your head. This is what the whole deck is based around. Okay, so here is the deck. And the idea, the unit that we want to discard with the Little Dipper is, of course, Atakhan, Bringer of Ruin. And the reason, you know, because there is other options as well. You know, people have brought up maybe Cytheria would be a better option. Cytheria, Lady of Clouds, that is the 10-mana Cytheria. Maybe that would be a better option. The reason I think that Atakhan and Noxus is the better option is because you can kill off your Little Dipper, because it only has 3 health, with Noxian Fervor. You can do it yourself. You can say to your opponent, I'm going to summon it as soon as possible, potentially on turn 6 with Noxian Fervor, and get an Atakhan out as quickly as I can. That's the kind of thing that you're going for here, and that is what I love about this kind of deck, because that's what you want to do, right? You just want to go a bit crazy with it. You just want to, you know, build a board as big as you can, obviously. Get Atakhan out, hopefully by turn 6. We're running all, you know, pretty much all of the cards that get you a Mecha Yordle, with the hope of, you know, getting Little Dipper as one of our manifests there. Of course, that's what we need. And yeah, we're just going to Noxian Fervor our own Little Dipper, summon an Atakhan, and then just laugh. And just laugh that, you know, we've got an Atakhan on turn 6 or whatever it'll be, and just attack and hopefully win the game from there. That's the hope with this deck. Really funny, really cool deck, I think, and it should be a lot of fun to play this one. And last but certainly not least, we come to Kennen Ahri. Now, God, this deck is a maze. It's a minefield. There are so many options to build this with. You know, do you go Ionian Allegiance? You can see we've got a lot of Ionian cards in there already. Do you build Ahri with different champions? You know, you could build Ahri with a ton of different things. Maybe it's Azir. Maybe it's, I don't know, some more. Do you go more into the elusives? Do you go more for mid-range? So many things you can do with this package, because there's already a lot of things in the game that kind of enable this, right? And what I've gone for is a couple key choices. I've gone for Feyblade Twirler. Now, I think that this card will be really good, because of course you're going to have a lot of recall. You might even have stuns with Kennen as well, right? So you're going to have a ton of that. Obviously, things like Dancing Droplet put themselves in this deck. Like, you're, of course, going to play that. I've actually gone for Navori Highwayman as well. Now, this might seem more of a confusing option to some people. They might be like, does that really make sense? The point of playing Navori Highwayman in this deck is this kind of strategy has always struggled defensively. You know, this kind of elusive kind of thing, you've always going to struggle defensively. And I don't think this deck is quick enough to run over other decks. And therefore, you will need to play somewhat defensively. But Navori Highwayman gives you a great, you know, chump blocker. If you can resummon Navori Highwayman over and over again, you know, you can just give yourself a bunch of chump blockers and not really have to worry about it. So that's why Navori Highwayman is in here. We also have Greenglade Elder, who obviously would be a great target to resummon and play over and over and over again and just build up like an elusive, like, you know, just give us a bunch of elusive massive units. That's kind of the idea there. And, you know, the rest of the deck I think is pretty self-explanatory. You know, it has recall in it, like shock horror, right? That's kind of what the deck wants to do. And I do think, I have no idea exactly what the best place to play all of these cards together is. I have no idea if even Kennen is correct. I'll be honest, in this deck. It could be something else. I could see Kennen Yasuo legitimately, you know, working pretty well. We're going to have to see how it all turns out. But I do think this will be definitely an interesting deck to try and use and build with. But with that said, that's going to be it for the 8 different decks that I have showcased off today. And there's plenty more ideas as well. I'm sure I'll be bringing to you some of them tomorrow as well. I'll be streaming tomorrow, of course, upon the release of the cards. And we'll, you know, just play a bunch of decks and have a bunch of fun. So yes, with that said, thank you so much for watching and have a really nice day.